Sonic Adventure is just one of many divisive 3D Sonic games, especially being the first major 3D Sonic game. Despite that, it still has a good share of its fans, myself included. As with many of the other things in the series, there's going to be some spoilers involved. I'm going to talk a fair amount about most of the major story elements, but I won't be breaking down every single cutscene and stage in this game. If you're cool with that, have played it, or maybe want a glimpse at understanding why not only Sonic Adventure, but both games in the series resonate with so many people even today, feel free to stick around. If not, it's not too late to turn back. The first experience I remember having with this game was a Dreamcast demo disc containing Ready to Rumble, House of the Dead 2, Power Stone, and of course, Sonic Adventure. I remember starting up and just being enamored with Emerald Coast and how amazing it looked to me, with the great Azure Blue World track accompanying it. This was Sonic's jump into 3D, and I was all for it. I couldn't wait to see what the rest of the game had to offer. So once we start the actual game, we have this beautiful intro which actually foreshadows the end of the game. It's like watching the opening of an anime and seeing all this crazy imagery, but once you finish the series, it actually starts to make sense. Kinda like that. With everything seeming peaceful, but then this water monster starts to wreak havoc. The city starts to get flooded, buildings destroyed, and this aquatic fiend starts emerging from one of the buildings. Then we get shots of Sonic running through the forest, as well as shots of the other major characters in this story, including Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and newcomers Big and E102. They're such quick yet effective shots, including this one of Eggman standing on the egg carrier, which always stuck with me, with Sonic seemingly running towards this aquatic monster for a final battle, from the forest to the city and beyond. When I first saw this opening, I was already amazed. All the quick shots and visual effects were enough to entice me to keep playing, and I couldn't wait to start this adventure. So as the story goes, Eggman awakens an ancient water god to power him up with the 7 Chaos Emeralds, with the goal of taking over the world, as you do, with plans to build Eggman Land, or Robotnik Land as it's called in the English version. So it's once again up to Sonic and friends to stop him. The first and only character available at the start is Sonic, but as you play through his story you can unlock Tails and other characters. Tails is the only character that can only be unlocked by Sonic, while Knuckles, Amy, Big, and E102 Gamma can be unlocked by Sonic or by anyone else once you meet them in the other stories. Since Sonic understandably has the longest story out of the 6 playable characters, you'll be able to unlock everyone else by the time his story is finished. The gameplay is fairly different between the characters, even for Sonic and Tails, but that doesn't mean that the difference is completely jarring. Sonic, being a hedgehog, can only travel by land, so any obstacles you come across are more apparent, especially with the 3D platforming, with the main purpose to get to the end goal, the standard stuff. Whereas with Tails being a 2-tailed fox that can fly, there are jet rings scattered in the air throughout the stage that cater to this ability. The layout is mostly the same as Sonic's stages, but you could spend a fair amount of time skipping most of the stage and trying to see how long you could spend in the air. However, Tails' versions of the stage are shorter than Sonic's. While you can usually skip most levels as Tails by flying in the air, there are still some parts where you can't and have to play some of them normally. For example, Tails' version of Ice Cap starts with Sonic and Tails already snowboarding, which would be the last section for Sonic. Or since his version of Casino Polis is mostly enclosed, taking place entirely in the sewer portion, there's less freedom to fly around the stage. The short and playable portions of stages can also apply to the other characters as well, with Sonic, for the most part, having the most complete version of the stage. The only main action stage serving as an exception is Hot Shelter, but to be fair, it's only playable by Amy, Big, and E102 anyway. Tails' level objectives are usually to beat Sonic in a race, so I can understand why they're shortened. While Sonic and Tails have a goal at the end to reach, Knuckles does not. For Knuckles, his goal is to find the 3 pieces of the Master Emerald in each stage. Each stage doesn't have a capsule or special object to reach like some of the other characters in this game, and only ends when the 3 pieces in the stage are found. There's also an indicator that alerts the player where the pieces are, starting off blinking blue when it's still far away but close enough to detect, then going to green, yellow, and pink as you get closer, and finally red when you're practically right on top of it. And if that's not enough, there's also hint balls to help guide you. So these stages can either be really quick or take some time because the locations are random each time, so the pieces can either be really close together or far apart. In this game, the indicator for all 3 emerald pieces is always active, unlike Sonic Adventure 2 where it only notifies you about the pieces one at a time. Thankfully the levels aren't too big, so you don't have to worry too much about getting lost. with these treasure hunting missions providing a nice little change up from the Sonic and Tails stages. Next, there's Amy. Her stages also have get to the end level objectives. However, with Amy, her objective is to escape from one of Eggman's robots chasing her and her flicky friend, whom unbeknownst to her is holding onto a Chaos Emerald. So instead of an object like a Chaos Emerald or a destroyable capsule at the end, Amy's is a balloon that carries her away from the robotic threat. While Amy isn't the fastest, her hammer bounce really helps carry her momentum, so the levels aren't too much of a hassle. She only has 3 playable stages, having the shortest story out of the 6 characters. Then there's Big. Boy oh boy. There's probably not too much to say about Big's stages that hasn't already been said. What Big lacks in speed, he makes up for in power. But that isn't really too necessary of information because Big's levels are fishing oriented. And this is the most contentious story in the game, and I could see why. In a game with adventure in the title, there isn't too much adventuring here. Mostly just fishing for Big's frog friend, creatively named Froggy. Just sitting around and trying to catch Froggy, who can usually be found close to the start of the game or rather quickly, so that makes things a bit easier. I used to really dislike these stages when I was younger, but now they're just sorta alright to me. I can understand what they were trying to do with these. They offer a different style of gameplay, allowing you to relax a bit with no enemies trying to kill you. But at the same time, it doesn't take too long to find and catch Froggy, just a bit tedious trying to do so. Then if another fish grabs the line, to me it's a battle of trying to catch it and wasting time that way, or just hold down on the button and fill the meter. Which, if it does, you lose a life anyway, so it's really a question of if it's quicker to fill the meter or just pause and restart the level, making the objective seem more tedious than it should be. Especially since the fish are all so close to each other, but I guess that's the point, right? But his levels are small anyway, so it's not too bad, just tedious like I said. Then again, sometimes you need the slow moments such as these to appreciate the fast ones and vice versa. Overall not too bad, but not some of the strongest aspects of Sonic Adventure in my opinion. Then the last character is E102 Gamma, and is actually one of the standout stories in this game. Gamma's story consists of completing certain objectives for Eggman, so you're technically playing as a villain, which is interesting, with the player being able to see a bit of how Eggman operates behind the scenes. Gamma's levels also function differently than most of the others. Whereas with other characters the timer goes up, the point with Gamma is that you're given a set time to beat the level, but the more targets you shoot at a time, the higher the score multiplier and the amount of time that's added to the score. This gameplay style would be implemented into Sonic Adventure 2, with the Tails and Eggman mech stages filling that role, minus the time decreasing gimmick. But the reward for clearing them all is unlocking the last story, which shows the real ending. While I do enjoy Sonic Adventure 2 as well, there's just a certain, as the French call it, I don't know what about the first game. I don't know, even playing through most of the same levels with different characters didn't feel too bad to me because they were changed up enough that it didn't feel repetitive. Though it's a small world they built, I like the world feeling more connected that way, with the different characters running into each other at certain points. Besides, it's kinda like how in the 2D Sonic games where the characters shared most of their levels, but usually with different paths. In particular, Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 and Knuckles serve as examples. It's technically the first and last full 3D Sonic platforming game to use the capsule as an end zone objective, further tying them together, feeling almost like the 2D Sonic games being perfectly translated into 3D. With the next game setting the standard by replacing modern Sonic's end level objective with a goal ring, with objectives not returning as an end goal objective until the more recent Sonic Lost World, and even then, that also had some 2D sections and wasn't fully 3D like Sonic Adventure. Alright, so Sonic's story starts off in the main hub world of Station Square, with Sonic jumping around when suddenly he notices the police heading towards the city hall. Sonic arrives on the scene to see the police's weapons are completely useless against this water god. Sonic is unable to stop him, but this creature known as Chaos quickly escapes down the sewer drain like the big drip that he is, with Eggman laughing from the sidelines. To this day, I'm still not sure how Sonic didn't hear that. Cut to the next day, Sonic is relaxing by the pool until he notices Tails' plane is about to crash. It soon does, and Sonic goes through Emerald Coast to rescue him. Afterwards, Tails shows Sonic that he was trying to power his plane with the Chaos Emerald, but it ended up crashing because he hadn't ironed out all the kinks in the system yet. So then they decide to go to Tails' workshop, which is located in the Mystic Ruins. That is until Eggman ambushes them to steal their Chaos Emerald, feeding Chaos the Emerald and starting a wild chase to get to the rest of the Emeralds. Until Sonic eventually stops Eggman's Egg Viper at the end of his story, with the belief that both Eggman and Chaos have been stopped. It's the standard cool character action story, which is fine, you can't really go wrong with that. However, Tails' story is one of the special ones to me. It starts off with Tails flying his plane until it starts to go haywire and crashes, which leads into Sonic finding Tails at Emerald Coast. Since Tails accompanies Sonic at the beginning of his story, most of his story beats are the same until near the middle where it diverges. Even if you haven't played a Sonic game before and didn't really know any of the characters, Tails has a great arc in his story. As there's a part where Tails gets separated from Sonic and he starts to remember how he met Sonic and how their friendship started. With the game indicating his reliance on Sonic in the beginning, to Tails then eventually believing in himself and stopping Eggman from blowing up Station Square with a missile by the end. With the citizens of Station Square cheering Tails on, where he gains the courage to believe in himself and take on the Eggwalker and stop Eggman. So it's a shame to see Tails have that arc and that character development continue into Sonic Adventure 2 and subsequent games, then get scared by Chaos Zero and Sonic Forces. But it's a feel-good ending to Tails' adventure and really enjoyable to see Tails break out of Sonic's shadow. And rather than trying to be like Sonic, just by being himself does he really end up coming into his own. Knuckles' story mostly revolves around retrieving the piece of the Master Emerald. This being the result of Eggman releasing Chaos for his evil plan, but also in turn freeing Tikal, which is a name I'll mention again later. Knuckles also has a run-in with Chaos, but is tricked by Eggman into thinking that Sonic is also after the piece of the Master Emerald. He soon finds out that Sonic was in fact after the Chaos Emerald and that he was tricked for a second time, but I'm hoping after this he's learned his lesson. So it's up to Knuckles to retrieve all the pieces of the Master Emerald and safeguard it, since that giant rock is what has kept Angel Island floating in the sky. Now on to Amy's story. Amy's story is one of the shorter ones, with her story about her trying to escape from one of Eggman's robots called Zero. It starts off with Amy carrying her groceries and reminiscing about her adventures with Sonic and the excitement they brought. That is until a blue Flicky crashes into her, who was trying to escape from Zero in the first place. So Amy resolves to protect this Flicky from that bag of bolts. Big's story is also really short, and all about saving his best friend, who is a frog. His friend, being named Froggy, has swallowed and in a way becomes possessed by Chaos' tail. So it's up to Big to run around and try to catch his frog friend. But his dedication really is admirable. He's really willing to go to the ends of the earth for Froggy. Then there's E102 Gamma's story. This is probably the biggest story highlight of Sonic Adventure, aside from the final one you get from completing all of them. So Gamma actually starts off as a villain, but has a redemption arc by the end. Originally working for Eggman along with some of the other E100 series siblings, but you'll quickly notice that something about Gamma is different. Gamma is able to retrieve Froggy, who has Chaos' tail attached to him, whereas the other robots fail to locate the right one. However, the critical moment in his story shows itself when Gamma is ordered by Eggman to retrieve the captured Amy's bird friend. Although Amy is able to reach through to Gamma and convince him to let the two go. This leads Gamma to decide to make his own purpose and liberate his robotic siblings. Before he's almost finished with his mission, E101 Mark II flies by, and Gamma pushes on to fight his older sibling as he's the only other E100 robot left. Gamma comes out victorious, but not before E101 fires a cheap shot before exploding and freeing the Flicky from within. Feeling accomplished, as well as acknowledging the Flicky within himself, E102 chooses not to activate his auto recovery mode and self-destructs, finally reuniting the pink and gold Flickies. The character arc for this robot is insane, and it's arguably one of the better stories in this game, if not the best. Only appearing in this one game, but making a lasting impact on those who played Gamma's story. The fact that the game is able to make you feel empathy for a robot like this is crazy, especially since this is way before games like Detroit Become Human even pondered the idea of robots having sentience and how even their life can have meaning. Maybe I'm missing some other examples, but for reasons like that, this story feels way ahead of its time, and sadly nobody except the player is aware of his heroic end. Funnily enough, not even Eggman himself. Even though I mostly spoiled it, I still think it's a story worth checking out for yourself if you haven't played it. After completing Gamma's and the other characters' story at this point, Super Sonic's story is unlocked. So fittingly you play as Sonic in this final story, which takes place after Chaos 6 was defeated on the Egg Carrier, and Knuckles returned the Chaos Emeralds to Angel Island. But Chaos, still feeling vengeful, isn't finished yet, and tries to gather and absorb the power of the Chaos Emeralds in order to become Perfect Chaos, attacking Knuckles and Eggman in the process. Sonic and Tails arrive at the scene on Angel Island, but Sonic gets a vision from Tikal. Now, Tikal has already appeared throughout the game and is even seen as the hint balls scattered throughout the game to help the characters on their journey, giving each of the characters visions of the ancient Echidna civilization prior to it collapsing, essentially the calm before the storm. But now you see Tikal's father and the rest of the Echidna tribe become obsessed with power and want to selfishly use the power of the Chaos Emeralds, going through Tikal to do so, with Tikal being powerless to stop them. This greed and anger causes Chaos to lash out and wipe out most of the Echidnas and destroy their civilization, with this resentment leading Chaos to want to destroy the world, leaving Tikal to seal both he and herself in the Master Emerald in order to stop him. That is, of course, until Eggman releases Chaos, in turn also freeing Tikal and setting the events of Sonic Adventure into motion. But Chaos runs rampant and floods Station Square and causes a bunch of destruction to the city by the time Sonic and friends arrive on the scene, even taking out the disgruntled Eggman, who's commanding the Egg Carrier too, but is quickly dispatched of. Tikal, seeing this, emerges in physical form and offers to reseal herself in the Master Emerald along with Chaos, especially when Chaos seemingly absorbed all the power of the Chaos Emeralds and scattered them. However, Sonic objects to this and hopes to calm Perfect Chaos down with the positive power of Super Sonic with the 7 Chaos Emeralds that everyone gathers. Yeah, it might be cliched about the whole positive energy thing and all that, but it's still hype to me. Even still, I always thought this transformation was great. Sonic holding all the Chaos Emeralds until he finally transforms, showing off the different angles, and Super Sonic for the first time sporting the red eyes, becoming the standard appearance for 3D Sonic games. Well, except for maybe the way the quills look, those have changed a few times. There isn't too much to this boss battle other than collecting a bunch of rings and charging into Perfect Chaos with enough speed to go through him and outside his mouth, taking away the negative energy from Chaos and gradually calming him down in the process. Each time going to a different part of the city, rotating between a few different sections, all the while he's shooting beams and tornadoes as you approach. It just feels hype going through the flooded city of Super Sonic while Open Your Heart starts playing in the background. My only complaint is that there's 2 phases, and at the start of the second, the song switches up from Open Your Heart to another song. While it's not bad, and I can understand that it was probably to represent the direness of the battle, I would have liked Open Your Heart to play the whole time, just because I think it's so good. And it just feels like there's not that much time to really enjoy it before the other song kicks in. Especially given the limited amount of rings and Chaos constantly trying to push you away with his tornadoes and projectiles. So because Super Sonic does in fact defeat him, Chaos does calm down and returns to a peaceful state, with Tikal and Chaos, along with the Chow, just dipping, leaving the city flooded and all, with Sonic running off toward his next adventure. All's well that ends well, right? And that was Sonic Adventure. What a game. It's still a great time each time I play through it, even after all these years. It's one of those games that feels satisfying when you see the credits roll, even for each story, but more so when you defeat Chaos as Super Sonic. After the credits roll for each character, an end screen pops up with the word "fin" to signify that the story is over, and Super Sonic's is no different. For Sonic, it shows him relaxing at Emerald Coast and enjoying the view after a hard-fought victory. Tails' end screen shows him next to a rebuilt tornado and looking out to the skies with his newfound resolve and courage. Of course, the one for Knuckles shows him returning to guarding the Master Emerald on Angel Island. Amy's is a callback to the start of her story where she's shown continuing her grocery shopping. Then for Big, it shows him and Froggy just hanging out at their house, happy to be reunited. And of course with Gamma having allowed his self-destruction, his ending screen shows the reunion of the Pink and Gold Flicky family. Then lastly for Super Sonic's end screen, it shows Tikal, Chaos, and the Chow hanging by the Master Emerald Shrine. Peace has finally been restored and everyone is able to continue their lives with the world being saved after Super Sonic was able to return Chaos to a docile state. Yeah, maybe part of it is being blinded by nostalgia and possibly wearing a dark shade of rose-tinted glasses, but I feel like there's just so much to appreciate about this game. The music is also really good and my favorite OST, if not one of them, in a Sonic game. My favorite theme is Super Sonic's theme, Open Your Heart, for sure. It's such a hype final battle theme, and it represents Sonic's plea to Chaos to open his heart, and to let go of the anger and hatred that he's kept within for all those years. Probably going to be one of my few controversial takes this video, but I think Open Your Heart is better than Live and Learn. And now I await the comments to tell me I'm wrong. But the rest of them are really good too. My second favorite is It Doesn't Matter, which is Sonic's theme, and it's such a rocking song. Even when I was younger I still enjoyed it, but somehow over the years I began to appreciate the melody and lyrics more. I just love it so much, especially since it's about never giving up and to keep moving forward on the path that only you can decide, perfectly displaying Sonic's personality of running on to whatever adventure comes next and always pushing forward no matter what, which I think is great. This and Open Your Heart are my top 2 favorite tracks in this game, with Open Your Heart just narrowly beating out It Doesn't Matter. It's a toss-up for the other tracks because while those 2 are the strongest tracks in this game for me, everything else is great in its own right, so it's hard for me to rank them after that. Another possible hot take, but I also like this version of It Doesn't Matter more than the Sonic Adventure 2 rendition. Just something about this version and how it feels like it really lets you take it all in and enjoy this rocking song. Tails' theme song, Believe in Myself, is another great theme in this game. It fully encapsulates Tails' arc in this game of learning to believe in himself and to always aim higher and keep improving. In a way, sort of breaking free from his reliance on Sonic and wanting to be just like him, and instead becoming more of a partner than a sidekick to Sonic. Much like how Luigi was considered the scared younger brother to Mario by Miyamoto and possibly some of the other developers at Nintendo, I guess Tails shared a similar fate by the team at Sega. But even if you didn't really know that much about Sonic, it's still a pretty well executed character arc in this game and does what it set out to do. Unfortunately, that gets ignored in Sonic Forces when he's reduced to curling in the fetal position, but at least Frontiers recognizes this inconsistency. So hopefully we won't have to worry about that in the future. Next is Knuckles' theme, Unknown from ME, mostly representing Knuckles' attitude and his duty as the guardian of the Master Emerald. And even though he could be hot-headed, he's got a heart of gold and that's what makes him so lovable, pushing through whatever problems may come up, even if that usually means brute forcing it. It also showcases Knuckles' reluctance of working with Sonic and others. Since it's right off the heels of Sonic 3, Knuckles is still apprehensive and it's sort of why he was able to be tricked by Eggman again. At this point only forging the partnerships in hopes of safeguarding the Master Emerald, preferring to be a lone wolf. It's a catchy jingle and is of course known for its Unlike Sonic I Don't Chuckle line, but it also has one of the greatest verses in any song here.
The new porcupine on the block with the buff chest, out the wilderness with the ruggedness. Knock knock is Knuckles, the blow thrower, independent flower, magical emerald holder. Give you the coldest shoulder. My spike goes through boulders. That's why I stay alone. I was born by myself. I don't need a posse. I get it on by myself. Adversaries get shelved.
If that doesn't convince you that Sonic Adventure's OST is peak, I don't know what will. Especially when there are so many other songs in this game that are just as good, if not better. Amy's theme, My Sweet Passion, is a nice upbeat pop song about Amy's feelings for Sonic. She still loves Sonic as is shown in her story, but she's grown to be independent, especially with the trusty hammer she carries in this, rather than being a damsel in distress like she was in Sonic CD. Even if she was captured by Zero, she was able to take him down on the egg carrier by the end of her story, so that's gotta count for something. But I mean, since then, Amy has really come a long way and has been playable in a lot more Sonic games recently. Especially being added as a playable character to the Origins collection with the Plus expansion, the final Sonic Frontiers update, and most recently Sonic Superstars, which has probably pleased a lot of Amy fans. Following Amy is the theme Lazy Days Living in Paradise for the iconic character Big the Cat. It's a wacky little duet between Big and Froggy, but it's a fun song nonetheless. With Big and Froggy being able to enjoy Lazy Days in Paradise as long as they have each other. Just two friends hanging out and having fun together. A great example that friendship always wins. Following Big is the theme for the last playable character, E102 Gamma. And this is a great one. It's able to say so much with the instrumental alone. There's some vocals in the background, but I was never really able to make out what it said. I'd like to assume it relates to his objectives as a robot and how he casts them away to make his own purpose. But by the end of the story, it's the perfect theme and has just such a beautiful yet melancholic melody. It's especially impactful when you're coming from the point of view of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, viewing Gamma as just another one of Eggman's robots, with Gamma's good deeds mostly going unnoticed, despite their impact. Then playing his story and seeing how all the events unfold, seeing Gamma free not only the animals within his E100 siblings, but also saving them from an existence serving Eggman, as well as the sacrifice he made at the end of his story. Growing from just a robot carrying out Eggman's objectives to carrying out objectives of his own volition and breaking free from his programming and defying his creator. Because Gamma had seen how his E100 siblings were just unappreciated and unloved, with Eggman fixing and changing them rather than accepting them. as well as how quickly he was to cast them aside when they failed to complete one of his tasks, punishing the rest that failed, even though only one of them could have succeeded anyway. This theme says so much about the character of Gamma and his overall character arc, and it succeeds what it set out to do. I mean, if Gamma wasn't special, why would Tikal even bother showing him a vision of the Echidna civilization prior to Chaos wiping them out? And speaking of Tikal, the last theme I'm going to talk about is her theme. Tikal is an ancient Echidna of the Knuckles clan, but it makes me think of how Frieza's race from Dragon Ball is known as the Frieza race, so it's not as if the Knuckles clan is the worst offender. But it's just such a passionate song that has no right being as good as it is. To me, it has this innocent yet depressing melody. It's hard for me to describe. It represents Tikal's passive nature and her yearning for peace, while the rest of her clan only sought power from the Chaos Emeralds. It goes beyond trying to make someone see reason. It's a daughter trying to get through to her father, as well as her sacrifice to seal herself inside the Master Emerald so that Chaos wouldn't destroy the rest of the world. I know that it appeared every time Tikal made an appearance, but when I hear it, I usually associate it when it's used during Super Sonic's story. That being the scene when Tikal reveals herself to Sonic and offers to reseal herself in the Master Emerald with Chaos, with Sonic shooting it down because you'd just be an angry entity sealed away for eternity, not when that's a possibility that could be changed. Which then leads to the Super Sonic transformation and boss battle. Then you got all the music that appears in the hub worlds and levels on top of those character themes. Overall, just a really solid OST with varying types of genres in there for variety, but it's able to do so without feeling disconnected. You could tell everyone involved with this soundtrack really went all in and made it as great as possible. There's a reason why people have a lot of nostalgia for the adventure games and want to see a remake of them, or at least a continuation in some form. Because I think underneath the cheesiness and wackiness is a story worth being experienced. The way all the individual stories act as necessary parts for the whole, and the intersection of characters and seeing their motivations when you do play their stories. Such as seeing the character development of Gamma and that he wasn't like Eggman's other robots and why he was a truly special case, or why Knuckles was tricked by Eggman, as well as the how and why the characters meet up when they do. I also love the narrative-based emphasis, with the cutscenes and interactivity with the NPCs in the hub world, especially with the whole story of Sonic Adventure being split up between 6 characters, freely being able to explore the story and world with each character at your own pace. Whereas the sequel to me just feels like cutscene level, rinse and repeat. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with it, I just prefer the execution of this one more, allowing the story events to progress at the player's own pace. But a great part of this game to me is each character can experience most of the same events, just through a different lens. So there could be minor differences between the same event, but it makes sense. And each character is able to obtain nifty little upgrades that you can find throughout the stories. It makes me think that the characters are leveling up in a sense, almost like an RPG. One thing that could also be noticed is that whatever upgrades you get for a character, it'll transfer to the other characters' stories. So for example, if you get the Lightspeed shoes or the Crystal Ring with Sonic, when you play Tails' story, Sonic will be wearing them in the cutscenes. Meaning that the same cutscenes can look different depending on how you play the game and the time spent between each character's story, with each playthrough possibly looking different from each other. Then you've got all these memorable levels like Emerald Coast, Windy Valley, Twinkle Park, and the newly redesigned Ice Cap, with Emerald Coast probably being my favorite starting level in any Sonic game. Overall, I really enjoyed all the stages in this game. Sure, there's only 11 total, not including the sub-levels, but I think that's a good thing since the developers were able to focus on creating enjoyable levels and tweaking them when necessary to fit certain characters. But even though the levels and the stories are shared, again, I really like the interconnectedness of this world, and seeing the points where the different stories connect and how they're all important. And just the way all the characters feel a control and how it feels like there's more depth to the controls compared to the 3D Sonic games post-Sonic Adventure 2. Not to mention how cool it is to travel between the 3 hub worlds, the city-based Station Square, the jungle-themed Mystic Ruins, and the floating masterpiece, the Egg Carrier, which makes the world feel so much bigger, as well as exploring them and finding all the nifty stuff such as the special Chow Eggs, emblems, character upgrades, and so on. One feature I've neglected to talk about until this point was the Chow Garden system. Introduced in this game, the player is able to raise adorable creatures known as Chow, which appeared in the story for this game. As the player, you're able to mold the Chow in different ways with the animals you can collect and raising their stats to see how they'd fare racing against other Chow. You could spend hours just going between the action stage and Chow Gardens, just roaming around and just playing with the Chow. This could be its own separate theme, but it's just another great part to a great game. However, this mechanic was greatly improved upon in DX in both Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, but maybe more on that later. Not to mention the iconic homing attack and ring dash making their debut here, which have become staples of modern Sonic gameplay. Yes, it does have some faults such as unskippable cutscenes or the expressive animations and even the easy mini-boss fights, but it's still a game that I enjoy fondly. I know that Sonic Adventure DX fixed the cutscene issue, but besides that, I still prefer how the original Dreamcast version looks and feels. Especially since the original Dreamcast version has features such as a celebration for the launch of the Dreamcast and a Christmas event through the internet feature, which is revolutionary for its time. Especially since we're talking pre-2000s here. The internet and technology today is a far cry from what it used to be. From the time period it was made, it was an ambitious attempt to translate Sonic from 2D into 3D, and while admittedly it may not excel in every category, it was overall a very successful attempt, I think, since I still go back to it and still enjoy it every time I do. In an era of remakes and remasters, why not include Sonic Adventure in that category? Because from my perspective, it seems like Sonic Adventure gets a lot of flack for its glitches and its extreme expressions, but I feel like that's all the more reason to make a Sonic Adventure remake that fixes those issues, possibly allowing more people to enjoy the game if they haven't already, or even if they avoid it because of the negative associations with it. The game's original director, and it's a name that a fair amount of Sonic fans might know by now, Takashi Iizuka, who is currently the studio head for Sonic Team, has even teased a possible remake of Sonic Adventure. Part of me wants a remake to hear new renditions or remixes of the soundtrack, and especially have Crush 40 and some of these other artists come back and make some more Sonic music. Maybe it won't happen, so admittedly, I won't hold my breath. However, if it was announced, my brother and I would probably be some of the first people in line for it. Anyway, that'll be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my second installment in this series. The whole purpose of this series is to talk about certain games and why I like them, and hopefully others can relate and understand why I and so many others enjoy games like Sonic Adventure and talk about them so fondly. As to be expected, this is a heavily subjective series, so I can understand a lot of people not sharing this opinion. I have more videos planned for this series, as well as some other ones coming up. And until the next one, take care.